In seeking judicial review, her lawyers are confident this will prove her strongest ever chance to win a right to release. So is it now time for Britain to find mercy for Myra Hindley? The bodies lay hidden in shallow graves on the high bleak hills of Saddleworth Moor. 5 children died. Their killers got life. But under British law, however foul the crime, no lifer was ever locked away without hope of release. Hindley's sentence was subject to a tariff, a legal recommendation as to the length of time she should spend in prison. Her tariff was set at 30 years. She's now done 31.
Myra Hindley may argue that her original tariff was set at 30 years, and it is unfair, unlawful, contrary to principles of fairness, to increase it subsequently to a whole life.
Justice should be administered in mercy, and there does come a time when you ought to be merciful to those who have committed offences. After all, forgiveness is alleged to be a Christian virtue.
For the families of her victims, Hindley's challenge opens a shocking and unwelcome new chapter. They've lived through 3 decades of constant campaigning to keep Hindley in jail forever. Campaigning that has consumed their lives. Anne West has cancer. Anne and Alan West buried their daughter Leslie in this Manchester graveyard 32 years ago. They still visit every week, but Leslie's body no longer rests here. The family have been forced to move the child to a secret grave because of repeated desecrations by vandals claiming to be supporters of Myra Hindley. Vandals who left graffiti scrawled on Leslie's gravestone. Messages of hatred and threat.
Leave Hindley alone. You don't know how many followers she's got. If you don't, we're going to dig Leslie's grave and put her bones back on the moors. And that's when we decided we had to get it all changed and have her moved secretly. Even though Leslie is not here in this grave, I've got to come here because it was her grave for 30 years. This is where we buried her. And I'll still keep coming, and I'll still keep putting the flowers, so what they do, they'll not stop me. I'll carry on. It's her resting place, was.
Oh, come on in, sweetheart.
Oh, God.
The desecration of the grave of a child. 30 years on, a case which retains the power to invoke extreme reactions. A power which has transformed a young shorthand typist from Manchester into the icon of feminine evil for a nation. Myra Hindley and Ian Brady were apprehended at their home outside Manchester in 1965. Their house stood at the end of a row in Wardlebrook Avenue. It's since been demolished, leaving only an empty space. The arresting officer was Detective Sergeant Alexander Carr.
When we went upstairs at Wardlebrook Avenue, we saw in the corner of the bedroom was this body all wrapped up as you wrap up a chicken or a turkey. And it turned out to be the body of Edward Evans, who'd been missing from Manchester. Obviously, to our mind, Brady was the main culprit, for want of a better word, and we arrested him and took him out of circulation straight away. It was 5 days later that I arrested Myra Hindley in Hyde Police Station. Why she wasn't arrested at the time was because she could have been under the duress of Brady for all we knew. As it turned out, she wasn't. I came to think of her as being worse than Brady because, for the opposite reasons, because she was a female and she had participated in these awful crimes, which to my mind was terrible.
And why did her being a female make a difference?
Well, there was usually they portray some motherly instinct or protective instinct to the young, but this was absent, wasn't it? That mugshot of Myra Hindley portrayed her as she really was. She was a brassy blonde with staring eyes and an impassive expression on her face.
It's very difficult to say what kind of a person Myra is now without sort of everybody imagining that dreadful photograph with the blonde hair and the staring eyes. All I can say to you is Myra isn't like that at all. She neither looks like that, nor does she behave in this monstrous way that's been portrayed by the media. She's actually a very quiet, studious, intelligent woman who watches very little TV, if at all, but reads avidly. And she's very knowledgeable and very intellectual woman.
Is she? I wouldn't care to know her. She's done what she's done. Whether she's repented or not, she's done it and she should pay the price for doing it. And that means life imprisonment.
It's 34 years since Danny Kilbride last saw his brother, John. The child disappeared from the market in his hometown, Ashton-under-Lyne, one Saturday afternoon in November 1963.
Anybody who stop on this market ground today or any other day, every single person will remember. At the time when he was missing, the 2 years he was missing, I can remember traipsing markets all over the country looking for him in case he had run away. He'd no reason to run away, but in case he had. And that wasn't the case, as we all know. His name was John Kilbride. He was 11 years old. He was only a baby. He came here to work for pocket money, to help my mum out as much as himself, and he'd done it for a while, and then this happened. He just went missing. All we know is he didn't come home at tea time like he normally did, and after a week went past, and then a month, a year, we knew, he weren't coming back.
They didn't find him for almost 2 years, and when they did, it was during one of the biggest mass murder investigations Britain has ever seen. Hundreds of police officers and volunteers dug on Saddleworth Moor, high in the Pennines east of Manchester. But it wasn't John Kilbride's body they found first. It was a little girl.
The search began last Friday on the other side of this road, the A635, and late on Saturday afternoon they found the body of 10-year-old Leslie Downey, face down in a shallow grave.
Leslie Ann Downey had been sexually assaulted and strangled. Under the constant gaze of the news cameras, they kept on digging. And millions were watching as 11 days later, they brought the body of John Kilbride down off the moor.
The chief detective came with a shoe for me to identify, which I knew right away it was John's. And I was just stunned. I didn't cry, I just sat there feeling very sick. It was devastating, but it was the end of the waiting. At least I knew, I wouldn't have to wait anymore. But it wasn't a nice end. It was a terrible end.
I suppose in one way it was a relief. But to bury your brother at that age, it was terrible. I remember the policeman coming. But everybody was just stunned. Nobody knows the full truth on what happened that day. He went missing. How long they kept him in the house before they did murder him. Nobody knows. They could have had him a week or a matter of hours. And nobody knows what they subjected him to.
Your imagination does run away with you. I know how he was found, not in a grave, in a hole, head first, with his feet 9 inches from the top in his head 30. And I'll never forget that.
I mean, people don't know how much I missed him. We shared a bedroom together. I wouldn't let none of my other brothers sleep in the room for a long time after. You know, I just wanted it to myself. It was just awful. Unbearable.
Manchester was in mourning. It was also in shock. Disturbing rumours were emerging about a tape recording.
All yesterday, detectives and sound recording engineers sat in a specially proofed studio in Manchester, picking out the noises and voices on that tape. It's thought there were 4 voices. One could be that of the dead girl, Leslie Downey, another of her killer. After listening to that tape, one police officer said, "This case is beginning to rank as one of the most nauseating murder investigations."
We were all together, all the detectives on the case were in one room. And we were either sitting or standing listening to these tapes for the very first time. And it was just terrible. What was being said and everything was obviously the lead up to an assault or even the murder of the young girl, Leslie Ann Downey.
He took me to the station and told me to be brave. Sorry. And he put the tape on. He said even though he knew it was Leslie, I would have to identify the voice. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I just couldn't believe it. It's just crying for me. Just let me go home to Mummy. I won't tell them what you've done to me. And Hindley was saying, "Shut your mouth, I'll give you another good idea." And I thought it was all over for me then. And a week or so later, they come back to their home. And he said, "We have a couple of photographs we want you to look at." And Alan said, "Don't put Anne through anything else. Let me do it." He said, with there not being a biological father, they couldn't do it. He said, "We picked the 2 that we think you could possibly look at." I nearly died. I can see him now. They had Leslie naked, tied over a chair, gagged, and hands bound behind her back, naked. And the next one was on Hindley's bed, and she had a mouth stuffed and gagged, and she was bound, her hands together as though she was in prayer on Hindley's bed. And that were the 2 that he said was good that I could look at.
Fortunately, when they were inspected, Hindley's fingerprint was found on the negative, the roll of negatives. So that was one of the things we were able to prove, her connection with the murder of Leslie Ann.
Brady and Hindley were jointly charged with the murder of Leslie Ann Downey, aged 10, and of Edward Evans, 17, found hacked to death in their house. In the case of John Kilbride, Hindley was charged with harbouring Brady, knowing he'd killed the boy. The trial at Chester Assizes lasted 10 days. Everyone knew these killers would not hang. Capital punishment had been abolished in Britain just 1 month after their arrests. Sheila Kilbride went to court and looked the defendants in the face.
Oh, I just felt very faint and sick. I just wanted to throw up. And my throat was choking. I'd been very brave and not cried, but after that I just broke down after. Staring at them opposite me. Very cold. No heart, not sorry. No remorse.
They began their life sentences in May 1966. "31 years later, now 55 years old and a devout Catholic, Myra Hindley is imprisoned at Durham Jail. She's served more than twice as long as the average lifer.
The judiciary and the Home Secretary in the 60s fixed a 30-year tariff, which must have been thought appropriate to reflect the wickedness of what she had done. Then later, much later, in the early 90s, that tariff is raised to whole life. Now, the nature of the offences hasn't changed at all, but possibly the nature of society's reaction has changed. Possibly we have become more punitive. Now, I think it's very important to consider whether that's fair.
On Boxing Day 1964, 10-year-old Leslie Ann Downey went to the fair and never came home. She'd been warned against strange men, but not strange women. Today, the vulnerability of children to sexual abuse has become an issue of national anxiety. But then, the idea that a woman might help to kidnap or murder children was unthinkable. The campaign for Hindley's release faced fierce hostility. Yet the Honourable David Astor has supported her cause for a quarter of a century. The ex-editor of The Observer is one of an informal circle of campaigners appalled by what they see as the unfairness and cruelty of her treatment.
Lynch law, mob rule, that's what she's getting. Because there's an angry crowd, therefore she should be hung or drowned or buried in a deep hole. That's what they used to do to witches, by the way. They had special dark places under castles where they put the witches, and that's what the public would like done to her, but that is grotesque and unfair, and somebody should object to that. Well, do you approve of it? It doesn't seem to be something one can approve of. She had become a sort of national institution of hate, and I think very few people remembered Brady's name.
It's a story that's been dominating newspaper front pages for more than 30 years. A story of heroes and villains, victims and demons.
When I first met Myra Hindley at the end of 1968, I was already well known as a penal reformer. I'd been visiting prisoners. I'd begun to visit prisoners 30 years before. And she wrote to me, because in my capacity of a penal reformer, saying that she hoped I would call on her and try to make it possible for her to meet Ian Brady, with whom she was still in love. That's how I first met her, at the end of 68.
And what first impression did you get?
She was totally different from that awful Gorgon picture of the sort of peroxide blonde with a scowl on her face. I mean, totally different. You couldn't, unrecognisable. She was a quiet, courteous, very pleasant girl.
Hindley's campaign began in earnest 10 years into her life sentence. The singer Janie Jones, convicted of controlling prostitutes in 1974, met Hindley in Holloway and became convinced she was innocent.
I couldn't believe it, because I was expecting something violent and something that looked, you know, really evil. But she was tall, she had hooded eyes, very cold eyes, but didn't look as though she could have committed the atrocities that she did. You know, she just looked like the girl who lived next door to you, and she was very sort of gentle and very kind, and she could be so nice. And she said, I have dreams where I've got grey hair, it's silver, and I'm being wheeled out in a wheelchair out in front of the prison, you know, when I'm 65. And it was very sad to listen to that, you know. And I thought, well, if she didn't take part in the crimes like she's telling me, it's such a shame that she's in the, you know, such torment. I left Holloway in May '77, and I started a campaign for Myra Hindley's freedom.
Thought it would be lynch law. So I know that's what I mean.
The controversial campaign was launched on network television.
Do you think that she ought to be considered for parole?
I really do. Myra has confessed from beginning to end and broken her heart and told me everything that happened.
I don't think you can allow the...
Lord Longford came under attack from Anne West, mother of the murdered child Leslie Ann Downey.
Lord Longford is talking about parole for Myra Hindley. When will I get parole? I am serving a life sentence to that monster. When will I get my parole? I've said this to Lord Longford once, and I'll say it again. She will be one dead woman.
Mrs. West, for the moment.
I want justice.
For the moment, thank you very much.
She may not like me, but I know Mrs. West and I sympathise with her enormously, of course. But she's been grossly exploited by the press and the television too. Over the years, they trot her out on all these occasions. I think that it was cruel, behaving very cruelly to her. I mean, to keep alive that degree of hatred, the corrosive hatred, the terrible thing. No, I'm tremendously sorry for her, but the idea of letting her decide Myra's fate would be ludicrous.
When I met Lord Longford, he said that he liked you.
Oh, God, you wouldn't think so, the way he's treated me.
He also said he felt sorry for you because he thought you got trotted out, was the phrase he used.
Well, what he said to me actually was, I would never see Leslie again. I said, what do you mean by that? He said, because unless you forgive him and her, you won't go to heaven. I said, well, all right, Lord Longford, I'll go where you're going. I won't go to heaven, I'll go with you where you're going. And I did call him. I said, you're the devil's advocate.
In the early days, I got a lot of very unpleasant letters, but on this programme, I can't quote some of the language. And you'd be shocked. The gentleman might know the words, and you mightn't know them. But I've been called an effing pervert and that sort of thing to my face.
For 20 years, Myra Hindley's supporters believed her when she said she was innocent. But the file on the Moores murders remained open. Brady and Hindley both denied it. But police were sure the pair knew something about 2 more missing children. Pauline Reed, aged 16, who disappeared on her way to a dance, and 12-year-old Keith Bennett. And then Myra Hindley got a letter from Manchester.
Dear Miss Hindley, I'm sure I'm one of the last people you would expect to receive a letter from. I'm the mother of Keith Bennett, who went missing and no one knows where, on June the 16th, 1964. Please, I beg you, tell me what's happened to Keith. My heart tells me you know. I'm on bended knees, begging you to end this torture and finally put my mind at rest.
At Cookham Prison in Kent, a crowd of reporters gathered to hear Myra Hindley's solicitor read out her response.
I received a letter, the first ever, from the mother of one of the missing children, and this has caused me enormous distress. In spite of 22 years' passage of time, I have searched my heart and memory and given whatever help I can to the police. I'm glad at long last to have been able to have been given this opportunity, and I will continue to do all that I can. I hope that one day people will be able to forgive the wrong I've done and know the truth of what I have and have not done. But for now, I want the police to be able to conclude their inquiries, so ending public speculation and the private anguish of those directly involved.
It was 20 years since the trial, and most of the original police officers had retired. Now the case was led by Peter Topping.
The Moores murders, of course, had always fascinated me as a police officer. So the reopening of the Moore case was really to try and resolve the mystery of those 2 missing children and to put at rest the minds of the families of Pauline Reed and Keith Bennett. I went to see Myra Hindley, And I appealed to her for help. And in doing that, I asked her if she would consider pointing out to me, first of all on maps and photographs, places which were of special interest to Ian Brady.
Places of special interest to Ian Brady. Police launched their full-scale search of Saddleworth Moor in the late autumn of 1986. Myra Hindley still said she was innocent of the murders. She still said she knew nothing about the missing children. She still blamed Ian Brady. When she arrived on the moor, in person by police helicopter, she was pursued by an army of press and television cameras, desperate for a glimpse of Britain's most notorious woman.
Do you personally believe she really does know something, or is it just enjoying the publicity and hoping maybe she'll
Time
get
will
paroled?
tell. Time will tell. But there is no bargain or negotiation with Myra Hindley at all.
So this will have no effect on her parole?
No, she's in custody. She'll stay in custody.
But back home at Cookham Prison, Myra Hindley now made a secret confession. For the first time, she admitted that she did drive the cars. She was involved in kidnapping the children. She did help Brady to clear up afterwards. The confession was made in confidence to a prison counsellor.
And I think she blocked a lot of it out. It's much, much too painful, much too awful, really. And it's only as she began to talk about it to me that she really was talking to herself about it too. So she was almost confessing to herself for the first time, I think, that it had really happened. And there were lots of tears and lots of sadness.
The confession she then made under caution to Peter Topping became public in the spring of 1987. She still emphatically denied she'd actually killed anyone. Even so, for some of her campaigners, the confession was a devastating blow.
When I read the newspapers in 1987, where Myra Hindley took the Mr. Topping to the moors to show them exactly where the bodies were, I screamed to the top of my voice. I absolutely freaked out. I couldn't believe it. And I thought, right, she's conned me, she's conned Lord Longford, she's gotten an officer 6 years imprisonment. Everything she's told me, she is just a pathological liar, and a very, very convincing liar at that. And I'm afraid I cried my eyes out. She only confessed because she wants her freedom at any cost.
But the truth is quite different to that. The truth is quite the opposite to that. It didn't suit her purposes. To confess why? To face the possibility of a new trial for murder? Why? And I believe why, because she'd come to a point in her life where, for whatever reason within herself, she wanted to do what she'd hoped had done 20 years earlier. And she made that difficult step into the truthfulness of facing what happened.
The confession of Myra Hindley was very revealing. It was though she was reading from a prepared script. She could go back and correct and adjust things. I think she was very careful in what she said, particularly in respect of her own role in those murders. She was always, if you like, in the car, over the brow of the hill, in the bathroom. She was never there when it happened, according to her. This moor is quiet, we're here now. The silence you can almost hear on occasions. She was but a few yards away, but could never give any details of sounds that she heard. Hitherto, of course, we must remember that she was saying that she was innocent, not being involved. That confession shows her in a totally different light. It shows her to be somebody who callously went out to abduct children, knowing what was going to happen to them, knowing that they were going to be abused and murdered.
In spite of the help Brady and Hindley had given him, it wasn't until July 1987, almost a year into their search, that Peter Topping's team did at last find something. a white shoe, and then a body.
Well, naturally, I thought, I mean, I'm not selfish, don't get me wrong. I thought it'd be Keith. I was hoping to God it'd be Keith. Because at least I got that, for that moment in time, I got that relief that, oh, he's found, I can have him buried. For my family's sake, and my own sake. And once I get him buried, it's an episode that's ended.
It hadn't ended. It wasn't Keith Bennett they found. It was Pauline Reed, who hadn't been seen since 1963, and was now confirmed as the very first victim of the Moores murders.
Well, it was just one living hope all the time, thinking she'd come home, and I was sat with my coat on for about 3 months waiting for daylight to come to run out and see if I could find her. I was just crying and thinking about what had happened in my mind. And I kept thinking about it, and I couldn't sleep through thinking about it, and it built up, and I think that's what caused it, my nervous breakdown. I was in hospital, and I remember my husband saying that Pauline had been found. I remember them, I had 2 nurses brought me home to the funeral. I remember everything about the funeral, everything. I remember following the coffin, and she was the flowers, and I remember people putting flowers on, throwing flowers down, and I remember putting the dust on Pauline and putting me a flower on. Well, it was as years went on, I was saying my prayers about it, and it seemed to lift me like a cloud, like a cloud lifting off my shoulders, and I began to feel more pleasant about it. Although I never forgot her any day. Even now, I think about her every day. And the way she had to go. It's never to be forgotten, that. Never. And I know how Mrs. Johnson feels, and I know how she'll feel if ever she did find Keith, which I hope she does.
The police never have found the lost boy, Keith Bennett. But before they abandoned the dig, Peter Topping brought Keith's mother, Winnie Johnson, to the moor. He'd interviewed Ian Brady as well as Myra Hindley, and he told Mrs. Johnson what he'd learned.
He took me through the moor and showed me where they dug, and he said, well, Keith was picked up at random. Now, Brady and Hindley had the cart on the top there. Brady walked down through the gully, and he took him down the stream. And Keith asked, he said, oh, it's nice up here. My mum would like it she come up here. And he said, I'll have to go now because my mum will be looking for me. And I think that was actually when he killed him.
Ian Brady was declared mentally ill in 1973. He has said publicly that he will never seek release. Myra Hindley was different. She wanted her freedom. And though every application for parole was turned down, she still had hope. Myra Hindley's predicament continues to attract new supporters.
As I drive around, I'm looking really for the places that Myra described to me. To see Gorton, see Manchester in a different light. I'd got impressions of it midwinter, and all the horrors that were around, obviously, during the years that her and Ian were committing the crimes, and really wanted to exorcise a few ghosts.
Prison officer Joe Chapman became her closest confidant as she waited for a decision about her release.
Myra called me into counsellor at the end of '93. She did feel very guilty for becoming involved in the first place. And there was quite a strong element of remorse there as well, wanting to turn the clock back. Her thoughts and her plans were that she could be perhaps freed to live in another country, to have space, to live somewhere with a new identity, a new name, a secret address, and that she would continue to be supported by those who were close to her.
Hindley's prison governor at that time of high hopes was Chris Duffin. Once a senior figure in the prison service, she's now taken early retirement. Governing the prison presented Mrs. Duffin with a dilemma: how to secure the safety of her famous inmate without imposing unfair restrictions on her.
It's an extremely tricky path to trot between the two. I certainly know that I was given a very hard time by certain people in the higher echelons of the prison service for actually drawing attention to the fact that Myra's rights were being infringed in ways that I could not see and could not understand the logic of.
Mrs. Duffin ran Cookham for 3 years. During that time, Myra Hindley had to spend months in the sick bay, partly because of her poor health and partly to protect her from attacks by other inmates.
The prison service would tell you there is not a separate rule book for Myra. The reality is there is a separate rule book for Myra. Just a simple thing like going out to hospital for a hospital appointment becomes a major problem if you've got someone like Myra. We had no idea that there were cameras in the bushes. We'd no idea that there was a journalist sitting next to us recording the conversation. And the next day, because my Manchester accent is stronger than Myra's, they actually attributed everything she said to me and everything I said to her. So you have to be very careful. Myra isn't a difficult prisoner. What you have to manage with Myra is everybody else's interest in Myra, which particularly the media, who have actually no scruples whatsoever when it comes to trying to find juicy stories about Myra, many of which, of course, are absolute rubbish.
Rubbish or not, the stories were lurid and sensational. In 1994, leaks to the press from inside the prison introduced a Dutch criminologist. Nina Wilde described Hindley as witty and sensitive.
Nina came onto the scene about 2 months after I arrived at Cookham, and she was brought in as a student placement, really, to do some work experience. And Christine Ellis, the then governor, gave her the opportunity to spend some time with Myra, to study with her, to play Scrabble, to basically have a social relationship with her. I did suspect towards the end of August that the relationship was developing into something more. There was a ring, and rings had been exchanged. So, and this was at a time when Myra and Nina had disclosed to me anyway that it was a love affair and it was a relationship that was going to last. And I had no problem with that at all either. I think that it was good for Myra and it was the way forward for her at that time.
So in 1994, Joe Chapman and Nina Wilde waited to hear if Hindley would ever be freed. She was now within 2 years of reaching her tariff. She'd done 28 of the 30 years set for her. Freedom beckoned for the Moors murderer, a politician's nightmare. The Home Secretary was Michael Howard. The question was when to release Myra Hindley. His answer was simple: never.
Of course, full weight is given to the opinion of both the trial judge and the Lord Chief Justice, but the final decision in these cases is a matter for the Home Secretary.
That final decision devastated her.
I talked to her at length about the suicide risk, and she pointed out to me then that she would never commit suicide because that would in fact send her to hell, and that's the one place she doesn't want to go because her forgiveness is in heaven. I don't think she wants to die in prison. That's really the bottom line.
She'll never win. She'll never ever win. With all the money she's got behind her, Longfords and Thames and Astor, she'll never win.
Bitterly disappointed, Myra Hindley decided to move on. She applied for and won a transfer to Durham Jail in 1995. Nina Wilde moved to Durham too. As for other supporters, Hindley left them behind.
I can't hide the fact that I was disappointed and quite hurt that I was dispatched in the same way as I've seen others in the past. Almost as if I suddenly didn't exist myself, and the counselling process was over. We had developed a friendship, and perhaps I felt that that friendship was stronger than in effect it actually was.
Inside Durham Prison, Hindley now changed her lawyers and started again with a new legal team. Channel 4 has learnt that they intend to challenge a new criterion brought in by Michael Howard, that a Home Secretary ought to take into account the need to maintain public confidence in the criminal justice system. In other words, to listen to public opinion when deciding on Myra Hindley's freedom.
Her behaviour in prison has been satisfactory. Clearly she's no longer likely to commit the same kind of offence. And thirdly, so it's said, she's come to accept that she was rightly convicted. So in the ordinary way, those factors would point towards early release. But there is this final factor, which is the difficult one. Would early release be acceptable to the public generally? And by the public generally, of course, is not meant pressure groups on one side or on the other side, screaming comments in the tabloid press. It means what would right-thinking people regard as being acceptable? Now, who are right-thinking people? And that's for the Home Secretary to assess.
Daniel, pass me that box down, please. Right, this is just one of the boxes of petitions we did to keep Myra Hindley in prison. The only refusals I did get was 2 at the time, and they was both wearing dog collars, priests apparently. I think public opinion is the most important thing. 99% of people was in favour of the petition because it stands for itself. They was asking for sheets to take back home with them to America, Canada, all over the world, and they was actually posting them to me with hundreds of signatures on them. I mean, these are just a few of... We stopped counting when we got into the, the hundreds of thousands. It's just, we'd done enough.
I think it places the Home Secretary in a very difficult position, particularly in a case that is as emotional as Myra Hindley's, because it's easy, if you like, for the Home Secretary to hear public opinion hostile to release of a particular prisoner. It's quite difficult for him to hear above the chorus of hostility public opinion that would favour the release of a particular prisoner.
If they're in for life, they're in for life.
Yeah. I think it's fair that they should be released earlier.
Do you?
Yeah. Depends what they've done. Depends if it's what type of murder it was, I think.
Yeah.
If it was cold-blooded or anything.
What about Myra Hindley?
Don't
No.
release her. No way.
No release.
No,
at
never,
all.
never, never.
I think she should stay where she is. Life means life as far as she's concerned.
She should be kept in with a key flung away,
And if it was a crime of passion,
Yeah,
then
we're talking
perhaps...
about Myra Hindley, no.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't think it's right. They give a sentence and then all of a sudden they turn around and say no. No, we're not giving the sentence, we're giving you an extra few hundred years or whatever. So I think she should be released, yeah.
To investigate if the strong views of Manchester shoppers are backed by the British public at large, Channel 4 commissioned a national public opinion poll covering 2,000 people. In our Mori poll, 1 in 10 respondents agree she should be released. But 8 in 10 think she should stay in prison. The voice of public opinion. Should it be allowed to influence an individual case? Myra Hindley's lawyers think not. They're going to ask the High Court exactly which members of the public Michael Howard consulted and how. They hope for a ruling that he acted perversely and that she may have right of appeal.
If Myra Hindley wins in her application for judicial review, the most likely outcome, I expect, will be a return to the original tariff of 30 years. It will then be necessary to refer her case again to the parole board, and if the parole board makes a positive recommendation with regard to her release, it will be up to the Home Secretary to decide whether or not to release her.
And so the issue lands back neatly in the lap of another Home Secretary, a new Labour Home Secretary. Ultimately, Jack Straw alone must decide. Is it right that public opinion should keep Hindley inside forever? Or, as her supporters claim, does natural justice demand that she be freed?
Without any doubts, if I ever got the chance, I would do it. And the rest of my family would. If I actually come face to face with Myra Hindley, she's just dead.
"14 Home Secretaries have come and gone in the years since Myra Hindley last saw the streets where she grew up. Even if she wins her battle in the High Court, she has long since lost the war in the court of public opinion. In Manchester, the families of the victims hold fast to their memories and to their implacable hostility towards a sin that can never be redeemed.
Some sins maybe, but that sin I could never forgive. I say the Lord's Prayer each and every night. As a matter of fact, my husband will tell you he's not in the room. I'm 2 hours saying prayers. But there's one part of the Lord's Prayer I will never ever say, and I never do. And I think you know what that is, so I'm not going to say it for you.
Do you think God will forgive you for not forgiving her?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
I simply object that this woman is not being given British justice like other prisoners. She's not getting the same treatment as other prisoners. That's the whole story. And that needs to be said.